The concept of toxic masculinity has been put into the spotlight following the recent psychological drama, Adolescence. The show explores how young men are drawn to harmful male behaviours such as violence, dominance and misogyny, all through social media. So, how can young people be kept safe online? And what can parents and schools do to combat the issue? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, the UK and other European governments are planning to launch initiatives to show Netflix's four-part series, Adolescence, in schools to counter misogyny. The UK Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, has said he's worried about toxic masculine behaviour influencing young men online. So, what can be done to help impressionable young fellas?
What have you done?
Adolescence, a new hard-hitting drama on Netflix, has been a disturbing watch for many, portraying a story of a 14-year-old boy radicalised by extreme misogynist content online, ultimately murdering a young girl.
What Adolescence does is shine a spotlight on the possibility of boys being violent. So there are people who will watch it and go, but that boy couldn't do that. The point is that boy can do it, and in that drama has done it. And so for all of us, suddenly the possibility becomes normal, and so we begin to say, what on earth can we do to stop that from happening?
The series has served as a vital call to action for parents and their teens, and has caught the attention of the UK government.
This violence carried out by young men, influenced by what they see online, is a real problem. It's abhorrent. And we have to tackle it. We are putting in specialist rape and sexual offences teams in every police force doing work on the 999 calls. But this is also a matter of culture that I think it's important that across the whole house we tackle this emerging and growing problem.
The series has helped generate conversations about incel culture and the manosphere, concepts many hadn't heard about until now. So what are they? According to independent research organisations, incels operate almost exclusively online, providing an outlet for expressing misogynistic hostility, frustration and blame towards society for a perceived failure to include them. While the manosphere is predominantly a group of online anti-women groups, often led by charismatic male social media influencers, including Andrew Tate, promoting a specific type of masculinity and blaming common male problems and insecurities on the rise of feminism. A study by Dublin University last year found that social media algorithms are playing a huge role in amplifying and spreading misogynistic and male supremacist content. There is a fear that this phenomena will lead to an increase in violence against women and girls. Why are young boys and men so susceptible to toxic influences, and how can this be combated?
Well, let's meet our guests in Cardiff, in Wales. We have Andrew Jenkins. He's a motivational speaker and a former contestant on the hit BBC show The Traitors. And here with me in the studio, we have Charlotte Ricca, who is a performance psychologist. You're all very welcome to Roundtable. Andrew, I'll come to you first. Everyone's talking about this Netflix series, Adolescence, which was made by the actor Stephen Graham. It was a very, very difficult watch, but it is a very important topic, isn't it? Give me your view on having watched it.
Thanks. And it's a very important topic and something I'm passionate about. I want to help and use my profile to help change the culture in this country. And the program is it's a difficult watch, to be honest with you, but it's fantastic. And I've always been a huge fan of Stephen Graham, but him and the production team have done a great job of capturing it. Even by filming it using one camera, you feel like you're actually in the show yourself. And it's amazing, and it just goes to show, it's quite true actually. Parents are really busy trying to build a nice career, a nice home for their children, but then they don't really know what's going on under their noses, to be honest. And it's a great series, and you should be really proud.
Andrew, tell me, you're from a working class area of the valleys in South Wales. Do you come across much toxic masculinity there?
Yeah, a lot. And I grew up in a toxic masculinity environment, to be honest, not just in my household, But I was in a rugby club from 5 years of age. I was in gyms from 14 years of age. I've been a doorman. So the worst groups of people for toxic masculinity. So I was part of that culture. But I say, where do young boys learn how to be men? Either watching role models, like my role models were people who lived in my local area within a 5 or 10 mile radius. But like I was like 13 years of age, for example, in a rugby club, watching older boys say and do things, thinking, well, that is how it's like to be a man. And I just copied them. So obviously it was, misogynistic, but you don't learn anything. Where do you learn that sort of thing? So you just copy older role models, basically. And that's what I did. So I was part of that culture.
Thanks, Andrew. Charlotte, to you, just on that film series, Adolescence, as a psychologist, what did you think of it?
Well, it's interesting because, first of all, I feel like I watched it as a parent. I've got a 17-year-old daughter and I've got a 14-year-old boy. And so I found it incredibly moving because of my 14-year-old boy. And it's really interesting because it's so difficult sometimes to separate the two. So as a mum, I feel angry for my daughter, really angry at what's going on and the way that she tells me the way that some of the boys talk about girls and talk to girls. And then I also feel a sense of real sadness for my son. And I can see his vulnerability and I can see he doesn't know how to express it. And when I try to discuss it with him, he gets quite defensive. And then I have my head as a psychologist on, which is seeing the bigger picture and which is trying to understand what's going on. And I think the interesting things about that show is that it did show the vulnerability of that boy, and what he does is atrocious. I think the one criticism I would have actually of that show is that it didn't, obviously I'm assuming intentionally, it didn't show the girl's family at all. And so what worries me slightly is it does slightly feed into the narrative. There was some blame involved. I feel there was some blame. He was being bullied by this girl, right? And I feel like in some ways he was let off because he was being bullied. And bullying's gone on since time began. And girls have been bullied by boys for, since time began, right? And I think it's the fact that his way of dealing with it was to stab her 7 times. And I think what slightly worries me about this idea of showing it in schools is I feel like it's a certain degree of accountability is maybe lost slightly because the boy is so vulnerable and you have so much empathy for him. I mean, I really did have empathy for that boy, but it was quite hard to have empathy for the daughter, for the girl who was,
She's the murder victim.
Yeah, she's a murder victim, but it was quite hard to have empathy for her because we didn't see anything of that family.
But that was intentional.
It was, but then I don't know why, if I'm honest, I don't know why, because I feel like it's slightly feeding into this myth of... Myth's not the right word, I'm sure Andy won't agree with me on this, but it's so complex because women have been oppressed and abused for decades, and we haven't murdered our perpetrators. And now what's happening is masculinity hasn't changed necessarily, but social norms have changed.
What's driving this?
What's driving which bit, do you mean? Sorry.
You say norms have changed.
Well, I mean, it kind of needs to happen, right? We know it does. So isn't it great, and I'm sure, Andy, you agree with this, that we're challenging those masculine stereotypes. And it needs to happen, it needs to change, and women are claiming back some kind of control. And unfortunately, what's happening is it's like social change has outpaced emotional education. So we're having the social change, but where is the education around that? Where are the tools to support that change? So it was hard enough before, I think, for these young boys, like you, Andrew, you were saying you had these horrible, toxic role models that didn't fit comfortably with you. Well, now, not only that, you're then being challenged by what you're trying to emulate this masculinity, right? But at the same time, it's being attacked. That type of masculinity is being attacked by women, and again, rightly so. We need this shift, but there aren't the tools to help men redefine masculinity in a healthy way, and I think that's the crux of the problem, is change is happening, but where's the support? And I think that's a government thing. I think it's the loss of community. And without community, these boys don't have anywhere to go, and that's why they're going online. And there's real neuroscience around this need for community. So it's this thing about, so if I can talk about psychology, so there's a psychologist called Haslam, and he talked about it's basically the hierarchy of needs, okay? And at the bottom, you have physiological needs, totally basic, which is, food, water, shelter, okay? And then you've got safety, and then you've got love and belonging, then you've got a self-esteem, and then you've got self-actualization, right? This pyramid. And we can't fulfill our potential unless everything else is in place. And community provided that. Community provided a place of psychological and emotional safety, and it provided self-esteem and belonging. And without those clubs, those youth clubs, those, football, music clubs, whatever it is, church, it's without that community, these boys have got zero self-esteem and they can't fulfill their potential.
Andrew, it strikes me just a lot of teenage boys are spending far too much time on computers, on social media. When I was growing up in County Wexford, just west of you in Wales, outdoors, Gaelic football, hurling, football, sport. And that's where you got your role models from being part of a community of seeing people training, sacrifice, physicality and success on the pitch. Those were my role models. And I think an awful lot of young boys nowadays just seem to be sitting in their bedrooms and the parents are not opening the door to see what they're at.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. And going back to the point, I don't think it should be shown in schools either, to be honest. Adolescence shouldn't be shown in the schools. I think that's the government just trying to do a quick win or trying to do something, but I don't think that's the right way, because the teachers haven't got the tools available to help support them children.
And Andrew, just on that point, about young boys and the amount of time they're spending online, there's got to be some sort of parental responsibility here, hasn't there, to get lads off devices and to get them outside?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right. And it's tough. I empathise totally with parents at the moment. My son, obviously, I'm lucky he's 23. But if you've got a young child, it's tough. I know, somebody, for example, who a single mum who's working full time. She finishes work at 5:30, but her daughter finishes school at 3:30. For them 2 hours in the house, she works from home. So for them 2 hours, how can she keep her daughter entertained when she's got meetings in work until 5:30? She just gives her the iPad. So she knows that's wrong, but how else is she supposed to do it? So it's tough to me. She does get out, she takes her daughter outside, then she goes walking or down the park and things. But for them 2 hours, her daughter's on her iPad because there's no other way around it. She's a single mum with nobody else around her for help and support. So it's difficult for her. So yeah, people do spend way too much time. And like I touched on earlier on, my role models grow up, people in my local club, rugby, football, whatever the club, the youth club. But now they're people online. And, I speak to I spoke to over 1,000 young men or young boys over the last 12 months in various schools, colleges, and they're crying out for positive role models. They feel lost at the moment because, young boys say, I want to be strong, but I get called toxic. So they don't know what to be. They feel a bit lost at the moment. And all they want, they're crying out for positive role models, which is what I want to be.
And you are, Andrew, and I think the work you're doing in Wales is absolutely fantastic, using your platform for good. Just tell me, what do you make of this Andrew Tate character, the following he has generated and the damage he certainly appears to be inflicting on many young men's lives?
I won't say what I think of the guy, to be honest, but I don't watch his... I try and look after my own mental health and well-being. I've heard about what he says and what he tried to... the 80-20 rule and all this nonsense he promotes, but it's disgusting, really. And, he's having a massive detrimental effect. And like I said, young boys... they feel a bit lost at the moment. They're stuck in their bedrooms, maybe on iPads, on social media, and they feel part of something. So they're listening to him, and they feel at least they feel part of something. So they know it's wrong. They know it's totally wrong. Some of them, and I think it's awful what he's saying. And he's a terrible person. And I want to try and I want to try and break that stigma, really.
Charlotte, I want to come to you about this guy Tate. I have my own take. So I think he has no interest in the well-being of young men achieving anything in life. No. It is all about ego, clicks, subscribers, and generating revenue. And he's not a very impressive man at the bottom of everything. He's quite an average bloke.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was on this show a week or so ago talking about Donald Trump, and we talked about the idea of kind of strong man politics versus strong men, and there being a massive discrepancy. And it's interesting, I think Tate is a very similar character. So he has what we call a dark triad personality, which means that he is a narcissist and he is Machiavellian. So he's a massive manipulator, which is how he gets all these boys, right? And he's a psychopath, so he shows no remorse and he's emotionally shallow. And also, just as Trump, he has a transactional view of self. And what that means is he's extrinsically motivated. So all those clicks, all those likes, it's feeding into his fragile sense of ego, okay? And he needs that. That's what feeds him. So it's about power and money and wealth, and it's about how he looks visually. And it's all about those boys, basically. He's creating this huge club. He's using them for financial gain, and he's using them to stroke his really quite pathetic ego, right? It's all about grandiosity. And what I would say is, by us talking about him right now, we are also feeding into that. And I actually feel like it's our responsibility to stop talking about him, because he loves it. He doesn't care what he's saying. He is getting a massive kick out of the fact that we're talking about him right now. And I think what we need to do is, let's not talk about, I'm not even going to say his name, right? Let's talk about the perpetrators. Let's talk about the victims. And we've spoken about, and we acknowledge that women are often the victims, tragically so, in this. But we need to recognise that these boys are victims because they are desperate for something. This incredibly vulnerable stage of their lives, right? The adolescent brain is so vulnerable. There's this incredible neuroplasticity going on, and it's growing all the time, right? So the limbic system, which is involved in emotion and reward, is highly sensitive at this point. So teenage boys and girls are neurologically wired to seek approval and to seek a sense of belonging. And added to that, their prefrontal cortex, which is for rational choice, is not developed, okay? So this is why they're so impulsive, and they're very susceptible, and they're very suggestible. So at this incredible kind of crazy cocktail of emotions and chemicals, we then hand them a phone, and then we leave them to it. And I totally hear what Andrew's saying about that. I'm a single mum, so I know that when the kids are quiet and they're on their phones, that gives me space and time. But once upon a time, we would just watch TV, right? And we would just watch whatever was on. And it's definitely a less dangerous world. And I think it's that idea of them, I think they're desperate for something, and the manosphere, as it's called, provides that sense of certainty. And I think it is really dangerous. And the one thing that really stayed with me with this show, Adolescence, and it broke my heart, was right at the end, and mum and dad are discussing it in the bedroom, and the mum turns to the dad and says, I think it's okay to say we could have done more. And it broke my heart. Yeah. And I think that's the thing, is it's okay to say we've kind of messed up, but it's not too late.
Andrew, give us your reading of young men then. When you go around Wales speaking to them across the UK, you're talking to young men about life, their ambitions, their vulnerabilities. What kind of feedback do you get, or what kind of sense of mental health? Where are they in it right now?
Like touched on, keep on saying, they just feel a bit lost at the moment. And, I think our curriculum is 100 years out of date, for example. And I think the curriculum needs updating. I think if we want to change the culture in this country, we have to educate the younger generation. And that's what I'd like to do. My passion is working with the younger children, younger generation, really, at the ages between 11 and, say, 22. Like, why aren't in school? It's great learning about Pythagoras' theorem and, King Harold and things. But why aren't we teaching our children about, their moods and emotions, give them a basic understanding how to regulate their moods and emotions? At the moment, everybody gets labelled with everything. I was talking to somebody last week and, my son's got depression. I said, all right, okay, I'm sorry to hear that. How old? 8. I said, right, okay. I said, has he been medically diagnosed? No. I said, he's having a bad day. I get bad days exactly the same as everybody else. I just got coping mechanisms and strategies I can implement and tools to stop me spiraling. Plus, I'm very self-aware. That's the only difference between me now and me a couple of years ago, is self-awareness. I know my triggers, and I know where I'm spiraling. So we got to stop labeling our children as well. That's what I find a lot of the time.
Charlotte, I just want to pick up on something Andrew said there, that a lot of young teenage boys feel lost. Where has this come from? Because when I was growing up in Ireland in the 80s, I think nobody felt lost. The country wasn't in a great place, economically depressed, and yet there was ambition. There was a world outside your door, and you were excited for what might happen.
I mean, I kind of blame the internet. I mean, it has, I think there's a lot of community. We spoke about, didn't we, the importance of community and how it feeds into those 5 needs, that, the physiological, the safety, the belonging, esteem. I think community creates that. And I think that has been lost. And I think partly that is to do, like I say, with government changes, lack of government funding, local resources being shut down. And I think that also that's perfectly timed COVID and the internet, And I think it is that thing of, I think if you give these teenage boys something that it feeds the dopamine, right? It floods their brains with dopamine. So it's highly addictive at this time where their brains are so neuroplastic and so vulnerable. And they've got this phone in their hand.
Well, joining us from Marbella in Spain, we have Rachel Harper. She's a principal at St. Patrick's National School in County Wicklow in Ireland. Rachel, to you, give me your impressions of toxic masculinity. How much of a problem is this filtering down now into the classroom?
Well, look, I think, following adolescence, there's been huge conversation here in Ireland. I think it's really opened up things. Parents, there's a lot of concern. Children are obviously talking about it as well more openly now, and I think that's been healthy.
And tell me, what are teachers saying to you then? I appreciate a lot of people have now watched that Netflix series. What are teachers saying? Are they seeing similar traits in schools, in your opinion?
Well, I think, like parents as well and teachers, they're both saying about how for a while there, how it was being normalized, certain traits in men. Children were seen to be appealing, or that they were making men come across as stronger or cooler or, more appealing. And I think now, everybody's really been woken up to this. And I think we're doing a huge amount of work with children and with parents, educating them in this whole area, trying to create a new way of thinking around this, and I think that's really big here in Ireland, trying to create and trying to show these positive role models rather than negative role models.
And Rachel, one key theme we keep coming back to on this roundtable is social media and mobile phones. Just tell our listeners, remind them the work your school has done about removing mobile phones from the classroom.
Yes, Enda. So it's just over a year ago now we brought in this voluntary code in our whole community across the 8 schools in our area, where we were asking parents to hold off and wait until secondary school before they purchase a phone for their child. Again, it was a voluntary code, so parents had the right to make the decision. So we had a whole year of campaigning hard for this and working with parents and trying to really get them around to learning about the benefits for their children by holding off to later. So we held workshops for parents as well, educating them on this whole area. So it went really well the first year, and Dr. Mags Green did an evaluation on this first year, and it was just talking about really some of the findings were how change really comes about when it happens in communities working with parents and with the schools. So some of the recommendations that came out of her evaluation was just children's rights and the children's voice. So year 2 now, we're really working hard with the children and educating the children, because they might not be getting a phone till secondary school, but they still have their tablets and they still have their iPads.
Andrew, to you, if any teenage boy is watching Roundtable and struggling with life at the moment and maybe tempted to start following some of these toxic men on platforms, what would you say to them?
The young boys?
Yes.
I think God, it's hard, really. It's hard. How can you stop them? Like I said, I feel for parents at the moment. It's tough. It's hard to stop them, but it's me personally, I'd say, be a positive role model for them. And the parents, I think the parents got to take some ownership and responsibility. It shouldn't take a program like Adolescence for parents to wake up. They should have been, what have they been doing up until that point? Do you mean? And I think the parents need to take some ownership and responsibility, and they're looking for answers all the time. And you look inwards and look at, I go out for meals sometimes in Wales, and I see the kids on their mobile phones having a meal, but I look, and the parents on their mobile phones too. I think you can just interact with your children, talk to your children about what they're doing in school, what they're up to, and I think that they've lost the communication, and the parents are just as bad as the children sometimes, a lot of the time actually, where I live. And you see it, and it really frustrates me. And I think, God, when my partner, we go out, she's got children, there's no phones allowed on the table when you're having food. In the house, the same. When you're out having meals, you interact with the children, you people watch, you learn social skills and that sort of thing. So I think the parents need to take some ownership as well. It's not all down to the children. And I think the parents need to wake up really and start taking a bit more responsibility.
Charlotte, that was a very good point Andrew made about parents using digital devices as kind of a free childminding service. I mean, at the extreme end of the scale, you get a situation like what happened in that adolescence drama?
I think there's a lot of truth in that, and we do have a parental responsibility, and it does make me die a little bit inside when I go out and I see families sitting on the table on their phones. Absolutely, we do have responsibility as parents, but we also have to be very aware of the fact that if your child is in their phone, if the child is in their room spending too much time on their phone, it's not going to turn them into a murderer. I mean, this is the thing we mustn't let's not catastrophize here. It's a very tiny percentage of boys that are going out and causing violence. It's a tiny percentage. Most boys are beautiful and vibrant and expressive and curious, and they're just looking for good role models. And as parents, we can be those good role models, and you have to engage with them, have the conversation. It used to be that awkward conversation about sex, right, and about drugs. Now we've got to have the awkward conversation about tech. Okay, talk to them. Like in this discussion now, we should have teenage boys sat here with us now. It's like we're a load of adults. We don't really know what's going on, right? Which Adolescence showed. We haven't got a clue. So we need to engage with these boys. We need to talk to them, and we need to get them involved in making change.
You've just given me an idea for another roundtable. Charlotte, thank you. Andrew in Wales and Rachel, thank you all so much. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable, TRT World. But for now, from me, Enda Brady, and all the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.